Hey folks, Sebastian from Madrigal here. Some time ago, when the channel was sitting at around 150 subscribers, I promised to put out a Q&A video. At the time I was planning to do the video at 200 subscribers, but I kept delaying it, partly because I was busy with work and partly because I figured if I wait a bit longer I'll get more questions than I can cram into the video. But I think the time might be right to do this now. This video will answer the most frequently asked questions I get about Madrigal, the Basis engine, the games I'm working on, and this channel. The questions have been posted on the Madrigal website, on Mastodon, in emails, as well as here on YouTube. I have found that certain topics come up time and time again, and thus I've rewritten the questions slightly, hoping that it covers all of the originally answered questions. If you have a very specific question you'd like an answer to, the comment section of this video would be the place to ask it in, and I'll do my best to answer every single one. Okay, first question. Could you make a tutorial series on how to build a game engine? I get this a lot, and the short answer is no. You need to understand that I've spent over 10 years working on the Basis engine at this point. I started working on what would become Basis in about 2010. And over the years I've written and rewritten many systems, learning as I go. There are a few things to keep in mind here. The first is that creating an engine like this is a huge undertaking and way too large to encapsulate in any kind of singular tutorial series. Perhaps a subsection of the engine could be put into tutorial form, but some people seem to want a tutorial covering the whole engine. I wouldn't even know where to start with such a thing. I much prefer talking about or explaining a subject in such a way that you can go off and put something together yourself. The web GPU video, for example, is one such attempt. The second thing to keep in mind is that just because I have created a game engine doesn't mean I'm all that good at explaining how to do it to other people. Also, since the Basis project has been going on for many years, it means that some parts of it are bound to be what you might consider old style at this point. For example, the engine doesn't use an ECS or entity component system, instead favoring a game object with components approach, which I feel works really well, but which isn't considered the golden standard these days. Finally, Madrigal is a game development company, not a company specializing in tutorials or education. I love showing and telling people how stuff works, and I also love spreading the knowledge of game development in general. That's why I put together videos like the one on web GPU, which I hope is of use to people wanting to use web GPU for native games. But it doesn't mean I want to spend weeks or months on tutorials. There are other YouTube channels that specialize in that kind of content. All of that said, my plan is to eventually release Basis in such a form that people can use Zig to mod or completely rework some of Madrigal's games. And at this point, I'm sure I will have to put out a tutorial or two on how to use the engine and tools. Otherwise it would be very hard for anyone outside of Madrigal to use them. Okay, next question. Why aren't you using a premade engine? So this is a very valid question. Why spend all this time building something when there are perfectly valid alternatives available? As stated previously, I started working on what would eventually become the Basis engine a long time ago. At that time, premade engines were not as ubiquitous as they are today, and have been for many years. Back then, a common way to create an engine, if you will, for an indie game was to put together a collection of your favorite libraries, and filling in the blanks with your own systems. Maybe you used a library to help with the rendering side, maybe you used another library for physics simulation, some other one for sound, etc, etc. And Basis started out like this too. And over time I ended up switching out some of these libraries with my own systems, as I became more confident in my capabilities to create what I needed. I also had, and still have, some pretty strong opinions on how certain systems should look like and function. Over the years I worked professionally as well as in a hobbyist capacity with some premade engines, and I found all of them fascinating. I have a great respect for anyone choosing to use them, as it is the most sensible way to go if you want to make a game and put it out there. However, what I find even more fascinating is creating a system and using it in a game or an app to create interesting content, knowing it's mine all the way down. Basis is sort of a best-of collection of stuff I have built over the years, and I know it inside and out. Though it is getting so large, and in some parts so old, that I'm starting to forget how certain things work, and I have to look through the code to remind myself. but looking through my own code that I've written previously is much easier than looking through someone else's code, so it's not that bad. At this point, I'm sure there's a little bit of sunk cost fallacy involved. When you have invested so heavily in something, you don't want to give it up. But I also think that there are some seriously elegant solutions in there, and I want to work with them instead of something someone else has created. And all of this also influences my decisions on what kind of games I make. Basis is quite good at physics-driven games, such as vehicle-based games. And it can do modability quite well, since I can release the tools along with the game. So that's what I'm concentrating on right now. Alrighty, next question. Can you please make the code larger? I can't view it on my phone. So this is in regards to me showing some code in a video and the text being too small to read on a small screen. I get this a lot and I understand the frustration some people are having trying to follow along on smaller screens. The fact is though that many of my videos are simply screen recordings, and I tend to use a lot of tools that don't support any kind of UI scaling. This includes the tools that are part of Basis itself, such as the level editor. I currently use a 1440p desktop resolution on my recording machine, and that is typically what I recommend viewing the videos at. Sometimes if I want to show off a usually relatively short piece of code in an editor that supports zooming, I zoom the code to make it easier to read on small screens. But that stuff is pretty rare. Also, if I work on something live on video, I won't be zooming in and out unless the situation requires it. If you have a larger screen at home, for example, I recommend watching the videos on that device to get the full idea of what I am talking about. Or if you want to watch it on the go, just rewatch those specific parts on a larger screen later. I don't think the details will ever come through properly on a smaller screen like a phone screen anyway. Alright, next question. How is the level editor UI created? So the level editor UI, like most of the tools belonging to the Basis toolset, is written in C# and it uses the old Windows Forms framework. And many people gasp when I tell them I still use WinForms, and the old .NET framework version at that. But it's the windowing toolkit I'm most productive with. It's not a modern UI framework, it doesn't look modern, and it doesn't support some modern features such as resolution-independent rendering or the aforementioned UI scaling all that well. It also only works on Windows, which is probably my biggest gripe with it right now. It is, however, the windowing toolkit I know the best, and it just helps me get the job done. Even recent tools such as the Timbre editor, which I only started a few months ago, is built on the same WinForms framework. For the docking panel support, I use the open source library DocPanel Suite, and I've done quite a bit of work in order to support dark themed UIs. You wouldn't believe how difficult it is to support themed scroll bars in Windows. It's not perfect, but it's good enough. Now as for the level editor, it's split up into two processes. So the editor UI app is launched by the user and it launches the game exe in a special editor mode, in which it receives commands from the editor UI and renders the scene using the normal game renderer. Most of the actual editing of the level data is done by the game exe, not the editor UI exe. This means that the user can create new editor functionality by encapsulating it in a normal game object component. The same editor UI exe can typically be used for many different game projects. I have looked at some more modern UI libraries, such as Avalonia or Flutter, but they haven't struck me as equally good alternatives, at least not yet. Sooner or later I'm gonna want to migrate to something more modern and cross-platform, but for now the tools will remain on WinForms. So, the next question. And this is sort of an amalgamation of many different questions. Where can I download the game, and/or when will the game be released? And I get one of these questions, or some slight variations of them, every now and then. Of course, I've been working on several games during the lifetime of the YouTube channel, and the answer to the first question is that nothing has been publicly released yet. Project Slide, which has been my main project for some time, and which you may have seen being played or worked on in one of my previous videos, is quite far from being complete, actually. Recently I've come to the conclusion that the original way of working on that particular game, in other words mostly solo and one level at a time, is simply too slow. The project isn't cancelled, but rather put on hold from a pure game dev perspective, until I can figure out how to complete it. Instead, Project Slide has sort of become my tech benchmark for the Basis engine, as it is the project with the most complex content currently. For example, my plan with the web GPU backend was to get the demo level from Project Slide running at a mostly fixed 60 FPS on my less than stellar workstation. The game is already quite fun to play, and there are some fully scripted missions, complete with dialogue, combat, etc., but it's not something I feel I could release at this point. My other project, Means of Transport, or simply Means, is in a much better state from a game production perspective, although it has much less final content. I know I haven't shown much of the project on the channel yet, but I encourage you to stay tuned because I have something cooking. Alright, then a quick update on what's next for Madrigal and the YouTube channel. So speaking of Means, I think I finally figured out exactly what I want to do with the Means project. What kind of game I want it to be and how I want to put it together. So I suggest you keep an eye on the channel. In fact, the footage you've been seeing in the background of this video is a sped up version of some level design that I recorded for the Means project. Now, video or content wise, I may be trying a few things and we'll see how it goes, but I have some pretty cool things coming down the pipe and I want very much to share them with you, so stay tuned. So yeah, that's it for now. Remember, if you have a question for me which wasn't answered previously, write it in the comments below and I'll try to get to it. I'll probably do another one of these Q&A videos when enough new questions have surfaced. With that, I thank you for your time, keep an eye on the channel, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.